This is the September 2019 edition of Planner Girl magazine. It's issue number 2, and it was created by Michelle Rohr, Hannah Bibi, and Amy Johanan. I would like to share my article with you, and you can find this online magazine for free at the link below. It's amazing. I would encourage everyone to read the complete magazine from cover to cover. I love it. It helps you to make your life better. So inspirational. Okay. How I became a magic money planner. I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong number, I politely told the friendly woman on the other end of the line. Yet, after confirming some basic information, we concluded that she did, in fact, have the correct number, which meant that I was, in fact, 3 months past due on my car payment. Confused and still not convinced, I agreed to make the electronic payment and quickly got off the phone. I anxiously logged into my checking account and immediately felt my chest tighten. She was right, and it was worse. Not only had my car payment been delinquent for 3 months, but my checking account had been overdrawn each of the last 3 months. It was what I later heard personal development guru Jim Rohn describe as too much month at the end of the money. I began to panic. I frantically logged into my savings account, then my credit card accounts, then my retirement accounts, scribbling tense notes and resetting long forgotten passwords. It was as though I was making up for a decade of not paying attention to my finances. The room was spinning around me and my world was turning upside down. Who had I become? For the next 4 months, I was obsessed. I spent 2 hours every day analyzing my finances. Being the planner girl that I am, I used a monthly calendar to write down every single transaction and color-coded each based on the account from which they derived. Behind closed doors, I was like a mad scientist, going back through months of data and taking meticulous notes. I was desperate to see how and when I had gotten off track. The financial reality I faced was so drastically different than my hope for this point in my life that I was besieged by fear. I was 40 years old, and I felt entitled to an easier life. Let me explain why. I was a good girl. I did what I was told. I did not rebel. I was the oldest of three, the only daughter to a single mother. I was the strong one, the smart one, the successful one. I was a quote unquote good Christian who went to church every Sunday. I lived my values and I got good grades. I went to college. I graduated from medical school. I bought a house, got married, had a dog and 2 children. I was by definition the American dream. On the day I received the call about my car payment, I had been practicing medicine for a decade. I had sacrificed my time, energy, social life, and relationships for my demanding, perpetually on-call career choice. So that meant that I could have everything I wanted, right? Wrong. And that's how I ended up in hot water. I had never learned to budget or manage money. Carrying debt was a part of my family's culture. I had no role model or mentor who was openly discussing personal finance. It seemed that everyone knew how to earn, but no one knew how to prosper. I had no idea what to do and seemingly no one to ask. I became fixated on turning my financial situation around, although deep inside, I had a gnawing feeling that it was too late for me. Hopelessly, I began to obsess over learning enough to at least teach my children how to avoid my mistakes. What happened next was nothing short of a miracle. One day, 4 frustrating months after the fateful phone call, a news article flashed on my screen as I was shutting down my work computer for the day. The smiling faces of a young African American couple and their small children caught my eye with the headline, "This 35-year-old mother is saving $85,000 a year in New York City and plans to retire in 5 years. Here's how." I quickly read the article, and by the time I'd reached my car, I was downloading my first podcast, Journey to Launch by Jamila Sufran. I was mesmerized. Not only had I been missing out on the genius of podcasts, but hundreds of people, a generation behind me, had created a movement around paying off debt and saving enough money to retire in their 30s. My initial feelings were embarrassment, shame, and regret. But as I discovered more about the Financial Independence Retire Early, or FIRE movement, I found more stories of people from all ages and walks of life who were sharing their stories. For me, early retirement seemed an impossible dream. Even if I wanted to be more present for my children, I could not leave a career I had not yet finished paying for. Then came a shift. During my intensive research into my finances, I had discovered that among my many creditors was my student loan from college. What a missed opportunity! I had graduated college 20 years prior and was still paying for my degree. I had traveled around the world, owned luxury cars, bought and sold homes, yet my lifestyle did not match my true wealth, or lack thereof. After gathering all the documents and calculating all the debt, I discovered that we owed a whopping $541,896.23, including the mortgages. The figure was so overwhelming, so unbelievable, that it triggered a rebellious thought. I am going to crush this debt, and my unbelievable story will be featured in a magazine. My article will catch someone's eye like Jamila Sufran's article caught mine. Then the magic began. The following week, I opened an Etsy store and began experimenting by selling my homemade crafts. I stopped listening to fiction books during my commute, and I began to devour financial podcasts, side hustle podcasts, and personal finance books. One fateful day, after listening to the Etsy Conversations podcast number 213 for the 100th time, I navigated to the Etsy shop of the interviewed guest, Michelle Rohr, and purchased an Ultimate Life binder. I then realized how disorganized my life actually was. When I found myself with all 71 pages of the Ultimate Life binder spread out on my kitchen table, attempting to integrate it with my homemade planner and my budgeting calendar, I sent Michelle a message on Instagram. I was a complete stranger, but it was not evident by the speed and compassion of her reply. I have all the pages. I'm not sure where to focus first. I'm completely scatterbrained and I feel like I'm losing my mind. She gave me the piece of advice that changed the trajectory of my life. Focus on your personal development, and the next logical steps will reveal themselves. I did, and they did. 1 month later, I enrolled in Michelle Rohr's Passive Income with Printables course with the idea of creating passive income to pay off debt. I had discovered that creating crafts after work to sell on Etsy was intensifying my problem, not solving it. I learned to use Apple Pages to turn my homemade budget planner into a beautiful product for sale. Without realizing it, I had created something truly unique. Each month, in addition to handwriting every transaction to keep myself accountable, I was choosing a positive affirmation to keep myself encouraged. I would write it all over my budget planner. At the end of the month, I would write down the goods and services I believed I could live without until we were debt free. At the beginning of each month, I would write down a goal for the new month and I would work steadily toward it. I had pages where I tracked my victories so that I could look back at my progress and feel motivated. I had pages where I tracked the difference between my pay and my debts and worked hard to shrink my overspending. And of course, I had my Dave Ramsey inspired debt snowball. I contributed to my budget planner every single day. And I relate strongly to Michelle's sentiment about her Ultimate Life binder in that it made me feel like I was showing up for myself and taking care of the future version of me. Then, after an 11-month self-induced crash course in money management, my feelings about budgeting had changed. It was no longer stressful. I was no longer panicking. I no longer had an adverse reaction to opening credit card statements or logging into my banking app. As a matter of fact, my research had demystified saving and investing, and I was ready to fire my professional financial advisors. I no longer saw a need for complicated strategies and tactics. The simple path to wealth was the best for our family. I had taught myself to plan, organize, save, invest, and control spending. I was not perfect, but when I showed up for myself on paper daily, I made amazing strides. As my budget planner got a cool new look, I realized that it was only partly a budget. The other part was more of a personal diary. Thus, the budget diary was born. The magic of the budget diary is in the setting of intentions. From the outset, you define what your endpoint will be. From that point forward, if you show up for yourself regularly, you reinforce the desire to reach your personally defined endpoint. Money management becomes a game, and finding ways to reach your goals becomes fun. Because the budget diary is mostly fill in the blank, it provides the structure, clarity, and organization you need, which leaves space for your intuition to suggest new ways to pay off debt. I remember challenging myself to no spend or no buy months and learning creative ways to repurpose the things I already owned instead of shopping. I made budgeting into a game and truly had fun pushing myself. One example is that I taught my toddlers to yell, "Bazinga!" while shopping if I lingered near an impulse buy too long. Another example is that I set an amount I wanted to spend in the grocery store, and then I would run around putting things back before checking out. Surprisingly, I found a lot of ways that we were spending money unnecessarily. Two such ways became the golden ticket to my financial freedom. The first showed up during my money management self-education crash course. I realized that our financial advisors had encouraged us to buy a lot more life insurance than we actually needed. After a several month process of breaking up with the advisors and cashing out the whole life policy, we received a check totaling an amount sufficient to pay off 5 of the 6 debts on our snowball. One of these debts was my college loan. So I felt a huge surge of victory and freedom. Shortly before the insurance cash out, I realized that we could not afford to keep our rental property. The emotional attachment I once had to the property had gradually dissipated in my pursuit of financial independence, and I realized that we were losing more money than we were bringing in. I set an intention to find a buyer within 3 days of putting the house on the market. I called a local real estate agent from the Dave Ramsey network, and to shorten a rather convoluted story, our renter ended up buying the property. The proceeds from the sale paid off our last debt and started a nifty little nest egg. In 14 months, I had gone from having a delinquent payment to being debt-free with savings. The best part was that I had a system to teach the method to others. But the good fortune didn't stop there. It was clear that I had developed pretty strong momentum around this, and I began receiving random checks in the mail. The surprises were consistent and included free gifts as well as cash. It extended to my friends as well. Whenever I would tell my story to someone with an open mind, they would invariably return to me with a miraculous story of their own. I attribute this phenomenon to the emphasis on mindset that was built into the budget diary. During the time of its creation, I was so overwhelmed, I needed a solution that inspired me more than a boring spreadsheet. As time went on and I began consuming a lot of personal development, I learned that what I had instilled into the process was the use of the law of attraction. I continued this practice and began a daily YouTube video blog, Travel Chat, where I used my super long morning commute to talk through my personal development, describe how I use the law of attraction in my daily life, my epiphanies, and even answer financial questions. I'm currently developing a free online budgeting course for the Budget Diary customer website to accompany its purchase of the planner. I have an email series, 8 Easy Steps to Manifest More Money, that is based on the practices I used during this magical period of my life. I've also developed an online course called Cash BFF, How to Make Money Your Best Friend Forever, based on yet more mindset techniques I continue to use. When I began this journey, I felt hopeless. I thought it would take 5 years under the best circumstances to get out of debt. What I learned from several sources and what was reinforced by my friends in the Secret Owl Society's SOS Club was that small actions taken consistently create enormous differences in very short periods of time. You can literally change your entire life one small step at a time. And it doesn't even matter what your first step is. It only matters that you do something, anything, to get the momentum going. The universe will take care of the rest. Thanks for listening.